start?
Yeah.
Closing government is going to enter this debate by answering three key questions. First of all, I'm going to explain, I'm going to further clarify how will embracing look like and what will we do if we don't embrace the positive stereotypes. Second of all, I'm going to talk about the opportunity cost that we will have to suffer through if we decided to not embrace all of these stereotypes. Lastly, I'm going to talk about interaction empowerment. The majority of my rebuttals will be integrated. So first of all, let's talk about clarifying how will the embracing look like, right? So given the context that all of these stereotypes are already hegemonic, we argue on closing government that continuing the momentum of embracing this stereotype is going to be easy. Like most likely, every time people say, oh, you're Asian, you must be good at math, you just confirm, like, yeah, we're generally like that. But on the opposite, if you decided to fight against it, to not embrace it, it is going to be very, very difficult because you are talking about a stereotype that has been entrenched for decades, ladies and gentlemen. This will look in things like you tweet as an activist all the time, you use your airtime in television to talk about these issues, probably you do even marches to address all of these kinds of issues, ladies and gentlemen. Opposition is justified. The cost of all of these actions, I'm going to explain why is it bad under their side of the house. So that's the first clarification. Second clarification, note that unlike what the entirety of opposition debate seems to assume, positive myths evolves over time, ladies and gentlemen. Sure, you might have an initial stereotype, but the stereotype can add over time. Take an example of East Asian. Probably traditionally, East Asians is seen as only good at maths, right? But with the rise of Rich Brian, Wu-Tang Clan, 88 Rising, which exclusively signs Asian singers, people progressively think that, okay, perhaps Asians, apart from them being math, they are also a hip type of rapper, for example, and this is also a stereotype that has been growing over time. Of course, it is not perfect, but it slowly accommodates people who have different interests. The difference of what the mechanism that the opening opposition explains is that opening opposition wants to just slap out. We don't have any stereotypes whatsoever. What we argue is that stereotypes that are positive changes over time. We are also going to embrace all of these positive stereotypes that are changing. We say that it's going to be much better. Even if there is a trade-off, we are going to take that. So that's the first question. Second question, let's talk about the opportunity cost of us if we fight against this. Let's first clarify, how does the myth start? Note that positive stereotypes does not come out of thin air. It's not like what open opposition said, it only comes from peers because it does not reflect the reality on the ground. The way these positive stereotypes start is that it starts when there is a significant trigger that eventually becomes generalized as our core identity. Like for example, how does the stereotype of black as an athletic person starts? It initially started with athletes like Jesse Owens, who participated in the 1936 Olympics, wins a lot of medals that are even praised by someone as bigoted as Hitler himself. The stereotype that Jews are smart, it initially came from Einstein, that receives, Nobel Prizes that have the equation of E equal MC squared as the most famous equation in the world. What I'm trying to say here is that it is extremely internalized through decades and decades of interaction, ladies and gentlemen, and it is very, very hard for us to fight that in the context of the limited resources we have right now. But the question becomes, why will not embracing equal to us actively fighting against it instead of us passively fighting against it? Right? Why cannot we just passively fight against all of these stereotypes? The reason why that's the case is because oftentimes identity-based issues is emotional in nature and it blows up quite easily within the communities themselves. When there is a consensus within the community that this stereotype is something that is unacceptable, like for example by a group discussion, via internet discussions, which members of the group are only exclusively consisting of certain identity, for example, it will become a consensus and the people will be very emotional against that. What it means is that under opposition side in the house, people will be actively fighting against this and it will be very, very harmful. Why is it very, very harmful? Because like what the opening side of the house have also conceded, there are a lot of issues that we need to take care about, ladies and gentlemen. Things like police brutality, pay gap, and so on and so forth. All of these issues are issues that we need to prioritize first as opposed to fighting against all of these positive stereotypes at the very first place. Now, unlike what opening government said, actively fighting does not always mean antagonizing the minority, antagonizing the majority, because we can always fight, because always campaign peacefully. The hard is that we spend resources for this, because note that when it comes to social movements, oftentimes the resources are limited. We are talking about people, we are talking about black people living in ghettos, and they're only limited to things like Twitter accounts that they have, and like occasional chances for them to participate in rallies. We are talking about the fact that a lot of people have limited attention span. They cannot be expected to process so many issues at once. What it means is that opposition cannot just say we will fight for all issues because it is not as ideal as that, ladies and gentlemen. We say that all of these issues are more fundamental as opposed to the positive stereotypes we have right now. Because okay, the heart of expectation might exist, but let's just take them at their best, right? What if the expectation has eventually proven to be not true? At worst, people will only be disappointed in you, and that's it. You have been through a certain degree of initial interaction. You have accessed some of them opportunity. For example, you have circles and so on and so forth. You're able to prove themselves, something along those lines. All of these issues on the comparative are fundamental in nature. We are talking about police brutality, pay gap, which is very fundamental right now. Opening opposition said that the bad treatments to members of our community exactly happens because of these positive stereotypes. For example, by the virtue of black people seen as strong, we will be seen as dangerous by implication. To this we have two responses. Number one, note that this argument is example based to blacks only, because okay, blacks are strong, but what is the harm that is going to happen if Asians are smart? Are they going to take over the world? Like, of course not, right? So there is no such stereotype, so their example is narrow in its context at best. But second of all, even if we engage to the black case of strength equal to violence, note that strength is factually not seen as the most significant factor when it comes to police brutality. It is violence, it is laziness, it is a perception that blacks only live in ghettos and rely on Medicare only, ladies and gentlemen. All of these things are much more influential in comparison to strength, which is why we say that this argument falls. So in conclusion, we say that the opportunity cost is big. This concludes my second question. Lastly, let's talk about interaction and empowerment. So I think that this debate thus far, it has implicitly conceded that this debate happens in societies where discrimination and microaggression is apparent. So the thing with the entire opposition side of the house saying that we want to fight against all of these issues is that how is it going to be successful at the end of the day, right? What we argue under opposing government is that one of the components of a positive stereotype is positivity. It is a positive opinion. It is a perception that you have value, ladies and gentlemen. And this will enable interaction to happen. This will enable initial opportunities to come out to all of these people at the end of the day. Things like at least you make some friends. You make some friends on Facebook. You are able to interact with your colleagues at work, for example, if you're initially discriminated. Even if eventually the expectation was not fulfilled, you have been through that initial level of interaction. This will open up further opportunities. We open the case of